In the 1950s, archaeologists cut a single vertical trench into the earth in North India. What they pulled from that dirt created a timeline that would dictate South Asian history for decades. But that single hole in the ground accidentally warped our understanding of an entire subcontinent. The site was Hastinapura, and its excavation by B.B. Lal became the absolute cornerstone of Indian archaeology. This chart maps the sequence pulled from that trench. At the bottom, you have Bronze Age Bara ceramics. Above them, a distinct layer of Painted Grey Ware, or PGW, dated between 1100 and 800 BCE. And sitting on top of that, Northern Black Polished Ware, known as NBPW. Because these layers were found stacked directly on top of each other, archaeologists assumed a direct evolutionary sequence. PGW was positioned squarely in the middle, acting as the neat transitional prototype connecting the Bronze Age to the later NBPW period. Researchers then took this specific vertical stack and applied it horizontally. They assumed this exact sequence played out everywhere across the vast expanse of the Ganga Valley. By assuming one local trench dictated the rules for the entire subcontinent, the field adopted a rigid, flat timeline. It forced every site to fit a single sequence, ignoring the reality of regional geography. To see where that model breaks down, we have to pull back from the trench and look at the map. Modern surveys have plotted the exact coordinates of over 1,500 excavated sites across North India. This map displays the actual spatial footprint of Painted Grey Ware. The dense clusters of yellow and orange indicate a high concentration of sites squarely within the eastern Ghaggar Valley and the western Ganga Valley. But as we scan further east, past Lucknow, the data points abruptly vanish. In the eastern regions, PGW simply does not exist. This stark geographic boundary means PGW could not have been a universal prototype that eventually evolved into later Eastern ceramics. It was a highly localized tradition operating in parallel to its neighbors. Recognizing this spatial divide forces us to discard the vertical model and rebuild the Iron Age timeline from the ground up based on regional facts. The geographic spread proves that a single, uniform stack of cultures across North India never existed. The traditional timeline is physically impossible. Let's focus on the territory where PGW is entirely absent, the eastern Ganga Valley. While the west was producing grey pots, the east was dominated by the eastern Ganga blackware tradition, which includes both black and red ware and black slipped ware. This blackware industry wasn't a sudden arrival. Excavations at sites like Lahora Deva show it had been developing in an unbroken chain since the 5th millennium BCE. The evidence for NBPW's ancestry is found here. It evolved directly out of these eastern blackwares in an unbroken chain, bypassing PGW entirely. So why was NBPW found stacked on top of PGW back in that Hastinapura trench? Because NBPW only expanded westward into the Ghaggar Valley centuries later, during what we now identify as the late NBPW phase. The physical evidence separates them completely. PGW and NBPW belong to two distinct regional family trees, permanently severing the claim that Painted Grey Ware was the technological ancestor of Northern Black Polished Ware. That resolves the top of the timeline. Now we have to examine the foundation, the supposed transition from the Bronze Age Bara culture into PGW in the Ghaggar Valley. Archaeologists like J. Schaffer argued for an unbroken cultural continuity. Their evidence came from sites like Bhagwanpura, where fragments of Bara and PGW pottery were retrieved right next to each other in the exact same occupational deposits. But finding two things together in the dirt doesn't automatically mean they were used at the same time. To understand why, we have to look at site formation processes, alongside new Iron Age Painted Grey Ware. This mixed fill provides zero proof the cultures actually overlapped. True coexistence requires evidence from a primary context. You would need to find complete Bara and PGW vessels placed together in a single undisturbed grave, evidence that has never been discovered. The supposed gradual overlap is a stratigraphic illusion created by moving dirt. The reality was a definitive hard reset between two distinct eras. The clearest proof that Painted Grey Ware did not slowly evolve from Bara culture is locked inside the empirical material science of the ceramics themselves. Bara pottery carries heavy, traditional Harappan traits. They produced elaborate dish-on stands, fired in open, oxygen-rich environments, yielding a distinct reddish color. Painted Grey Ware appears in the region as a sudden, radical departure from those traditional forms. The new formal assemblage consists of straight-sided bowls and hemispherical shapes. The older Bara designs vanish entirely from the record. These new shapes adhere to strict morphological rules, particularly the shallow dishes, which maintain a maximum diameter-to-height index of less than 0.25. The manufacturing signature is also equally distinct. PGW is an exceptionally fine ware, with walls measuring less than 5 mm thick. A close inspection of the surface reveals fine, parallel horizontal striations, proving these vessels were thrown on a rapidly spinning, fast potter's wheel. The lower body of the pots shows sharp, irregular scraping marks, indicating a specific trimming technique used during the final finishing stage. The most extreme leap is the firing method. To achieve that hard, gray finish, the potters engineered closed kilns that deliberately restricted oxygen flow, creating a highly reduced firing environment. This is the exact opposite of the Bara open-air firing. It requires a completely different thermal dynamic and a different physical structure to execute. Moving from thick red pots to reduced-fired, millimeter-thin gray wares isn't stylistic drift. It represents the sudden adoption of a completely new material science. When we combine the spatial mapping with the material science, B.B. Law's vertical trench model completely collapses. The Iron Age in North India was a geographic mosaic of parallel cultures, and the timeline splits based on where you stand. In the West, the Bronze Age Bara culture comes to an end. It is followed by a sharp technological break, leading to the sudden emergence of painted grey ware. Meanwhile, in the East, an entirely different sequence plays out. The black ware tradition evolves continuously, transitioning smoothly into early Northern Black Polished Ware. These two distinct worlds only physically intersect centuries later, when the makers of NBPW finally expand their territory westward, leaving their pottery on top of the older PGW sites. By discarding the stratigraphic illusions of the 1950s, we can identify painted grey ware for what it represents: the technologically distinct foundation of Western North India's Iron Age.